Now, there have been a lot of stories in the news about police officers shooting unarmed people, usually unarmed black guys. And the question often arises is that a few bad apples, or are they all guilty of some degree of abuse? Now, both answers are wrong, of course. The answer is more nuanced than that. I'm going to get to that in a second. But boy, do we have the perfect example of a story like that in today's news. It turns out that a guy by the name of Walter L. Scott, who's 50 years old, was stopped for a broken tail light in North Charleston, South Carolina on Saturday, just this past Saturday. Well, there was apparently a scuffle with police, and he ran away. He was unarmed at the time. The officer shot him in the back 5 times. Now, he shot at him 8 times. He hit him 5 times, including through the heart, and killed him. Now, we have video of that, and of course, I got to warn you, person's going to get killed in this video. Don't watch it if that bothers you. But it gives you a good sense of what happened in this altercation. Because what the cop says does not match what the video says at all. The cop says he took my taser gun and ran away with it, and that's why he thought he was a danger. Now let's watch what happens.
Oh, shit.
Now, the officer said at the time, shots fired and the subject is down. He took my taser. Now, there's an object that appears to be near the police officer's feet at the time. You can't make out from the video exactly what it is, but you will see that again in the next video. Because in the next video, he handcuffs a person who clearly does not need to be restrained if he hasn't already passed away, which is, of course, at this point we know is incredibly likely that at that point he had already died. Is clearly incapacitated. In the longer version of the video, the cop's yelling at Mr. Scott here and saying, stay down, as if he's still resisting or there's any kind of scuffle. It's all absurd, right? But also notice at the end of this part of the video, the officer drops something near Mr. Scott afterwards. Watch.
Fucking abuse.
Now, it's not possible to tell from that video exactly what that object is, but he was tased. Mr. Scott was tased, and that's part of the reason that he ran away. He had trouble with the law in the past because of child custody issues. That's why they think he might have been running away from the police officer to begin with. And you see an object laying down by the cop where Mr. Scott was originally tased. He shoots him in the back 5 times, needlessly handcuffs him, goes back and picks up that object, and then drops him by the person who's already at this point passed away. Now, the officer involved is Michael T. Slager. He's 33 years old. In order to use deadly force against a fleeing suspect, you can only use it if there's probable cause that he was going to pose a significant threat of death or serious physical injury to that officer or others. Now, as you see Mr. Scott running away there, did it appear that he was going to cause serious physical injury or death to that officer as he's running away from him or to others when he's unarmed? It certainly doesn't appear that way. Now, we've seen stories like this time and time again. Now, the interesting part of this story is, it turns out, today the officer actually got charged. That often does not happen, but he was charged today with murder based on video evidence. So, wow. Okay, now, that is an interesting turn of events and a positive one, given that the video seems to show he has callous disregard for this man's life that he seems to have taken. By the way, I'll show you one last part of the video that makes that even clearer. Well after he's already been shot in the back in the corner, says yes, 3 out of the 5 times he got shot, 3 are clearly in the back. okay? And you saw it in the video anyway. He comes in and checks for his pulse after what appears to be planting the evidence, after shooting him, after he's already dead, after handcuffing him, and then you get this. That callous disregard for life seems stunning to most of us, but unfortunately, all too often, it happens across the country to many people, but predominantly African Americans. That's certainly been a theme that you've seen in the news over and over again. And in this case, North Charleston has a population that's 47% African American, only 37% white, but their police force is 80% white. So let me get to my final judgment on cops in this regard. So is there disparate treatment of African Americans? Of course there is. Now it exists in society at large. So, you know, it's not just the police officers. There's a ton of assumptions made about African Americans. Study after study has shown it, proven it. And oftentimes it's not somebody trying to be overtly racist, it's assumptions they make in the back of their mind without even realizing they're making it. So in a situation like that, an officer might, if they see an African American, might think that they're more dangerous because of the stereotypes that are unfortunately a huge part of how our unconscious works in this society. So that's what's pervasive. It affects a lot of us, and certainly it affects the police force like it does the rest of society. Now, point number two is, and I think this is probably the most important part and one I often emphasize, cops are taught to take absolutely no risk with their own lives or well-being. So if there's any chance that you're going to get hurt in any way, or they hurt your pride, or they didn't listen to your commands, or perhaps like in this case, they're running away from you when you told them not to run away, well, you got to put them down. Now, in the trainings, they're all constantly taught, sometimes for understandable reasons. What if somebody attacks you with a gun and kills you in a split second? Yeah, but that almost never happens. If from time to time it does happen, and unfortunately when it does happen, they usually get shot from the back, as it happened in New York. And you don't have time to react to that. But not every person is going to shoot you in a split second. In fact, the overwhelming majority of them are not going to. But they don't take that chance. Like Tamir Rice, the 12-year-old in Cleveland, who was shot within 2 seconds. He had a toy gun, but they never had a chance to figure out it was a toy gun. They never gave him a chance to put it down because they were taught immediately react with as much force as you got. The training is wrong. That's why it's so pervasive all throughout the country. The training is put down the force immediately. No threats allowed. It's not acceptable. Now, finally, look, on a macro scale, we have the powerless being steamrolled all across the country by the powerful. This is not about race. This is about, listen, if you're a banker and you're connected and you have all the money in the world, you get to buy off the politicians and you get whatever tax bracket you want. You get to break any rules that you like. There are no consequences. There was a case of the kid who claimed affluenza, that he was so rich and white that he didn't know the consequences of his actions because rich people don't have any consequences. He made that case in court and he won. Amazing, amazing, right? Whereas if you don't have any power, well, unfortunately, and I think conservatives can agree with this too, a lot of government agencies, in this case including the cops, think there's no consequence. What difference does it make if I shoot that person or I don't shoot that person? I'm not taking any risks with me at all, not even 1%. And that person can't do a damn thing about it. They're armed, they're unarmed, they're black, they're white. All I know is no consequences for me. I get to do whatever I want to them and move on with my life. When you take those forces and put them into one, the result you get is the result you're seeing all across the country. Now, this happens to be a unique case because the officer was actually charged with murder. But in the stories we've done, 9 out of 10 times they're not charged. They do get away with it. And it does reinforce that vicious cycle, which is, don't worry about the powerless. We get to run over them, and we get to do it all the time. Now, imagine how much that happened before we started seeing it in all these cell phone cameras. So now we see it a little bit better. We hope there's some action taken to remedy it, including bringing justice to the people who do it, as happened in this case. Now, the justice system will work out. At least he was charged, though. And that's the critical part. But overall, that's why you have it. It's not a few bad apples. they're not all racist. They're not all naturally evil. Of course, cops are human beings, but when you put all these things into effect, they wind up shooting the powerless a hell of a lot more often than they should. And that's the reality.